This is our value scales practice in acrylic. We're going to be creating tints, tones, and shades of one color of your choice. So you're going to need a water cup, some brushes, paper towels, some palette paper, a color of your choice, and then black and white. So get your worksheet, and then in the center you're going to be putting the hue, and then on the left are the shades, the right are the tints, and then going down will be your tones. So I'm going to do an example of this in the primary colors. So I'll do a blue, a red, and a yellow for you. But you can pick a different color if you like. For the tone, I do need to mix a gray. So to mix a gray, you kind of want a bunch of white with a little bit of black. So you're trying to make like a mid-gray. If you need help with this in class, just ask. And then also notice I'm using my palette knife to mix the blob of color and not my brush. You want to get in the habit, if you're mixing a bunch of one color, to use a palette knife and not your brush, because the brush just isn't as efficient as mixing a bunch of paint, and then it gets all over the ferrule of the brush, and sometimes you don't get your colors mixed properly. So I would suggest using a palette knife for this. So I'm going to start with red, and I'm already breaking my rule and scooping paint with my brush instead of the palette knife. So please don't do that. So I'm going to take my flat brush, and then I'm going to put the edge right up against the edge of the box, and then I'm just going to pull. So I'm trying to fill that square with as neat edges as I possibly can. All right, now I'm going to start with my tints. So I did use my palette knife, so good for me. So you're just going to start by adding a tiny bit of white to the red. Tiny bit. So you want it to be a step lighter than the red. So there should be a difference from one box to the next. If there's not, just let it dry and then paint right over it. That's one of the really good things about acrylic, is it dries really fast and it's really easy to just paint over anything you don't like. So then to create the next box, I'm going to put more white on my brush, and then I'm pretty much just mixing what's on my brush with more white. And then you'll notice I'm not really happy with that one. So I'm going to add a little more white. And then you can see I flip my brush over and over, kind of do little X shapes when I'm mixing with a brush. All right, so I'm more happy with that one. There's more of a difference between one to the next. So then I'm going to take what's on my brush and add more. See, I almost went to the cup. Add more white. Until I can get it where it is different than the box next door. And then, so see, for that box, I pretty much just started mixing with just what's on my brush, and I'm not adding any more red. I keep adding white. And then your last box should be pretty light. It should be almost white with just a hint of the hue. So as you are looking at your work, just make sure each box lightens in value. So there shouldn't be two that are that similar. All right, so now I'm going to do the shades. So remember, a shade is the hue plus black. So again, make sure you have a palette knife to scoop them out of the cups so we're not contaminating the paint. And you really don't need a whole lot of black. Black is a pretty powerful shade. So I'm going to take my pure red and just add a tiny bit of the black. And you can see how it tones it down. It gets rid of some of the brightness. And just like with the tints, instead of getting lighter though, each box should get a little bit darker. And then I just add a little bit more black to what's on my brush, a little bit more black, until I get to the final box, which should be pretty much almost black. So let's speed this up a little bit. So you can see my last one is pretty black. And I'm just going back in there to do a little touch up because I want to make sure each box looks different. And acrylic paint does dry down a little bit darker than what it looks when you're painting. Next is to do the tones. So tones is the hue plus gray. So I mixed my gray up there. And it's the same process. I'm just going to take what I have and I'm going to add a little bit of gray. And that is really going to cut the intensity and make it a little bit more dull. A lot more neutral. And then as you go down, each box should change. So the last box should be pretty close to pure gray. All right, so now I have my red done. So let's take a look. All right, so each box looks a little different than the next. Then we're just gonna let it dry. So our next color is blue. So this is the same process as the red. I'm going to put the pure color in the middle. I'm going to continuously add white to create the tints. And then I'm going to add black more and more to make the shades. And then taking the pure hue and adding gray to make the tones. So I'm going to speed this up. And I'll meet you at the end. Alright, so here's my finished work. So there's a nice progression from each box to the next. So again, just make sure as you make them lighter, darker, more toned, that there's just a difference from one box to the next. So the last example I'm going to do for you is yellow. Yellow is kind of tricky because overall yellow is just a lighter hue. And when you add black and white to it, it acts a little bit different. So let's take a look. All right, I did speed this up a little bit. So to make it lighter, you really have to pay attention to how much white you're adding. So your last box should be pretty much white because yellow is just so light in itself. So try really hard to make your boxes different. And like I said, that last box is going to be almost all white with just the tiniest bit of yellow. So you can see there. They're still pretty similar, but if you see it in person, they are different. Now, with this one, I did the tones next. You don't have to do it in any particular order. So with the tones, same kind of thing. When you add black or gray to a yellow, it kind of will make it like a green kind of color. So that's correct. Don't think you're doing anything wrong. But just like with the others, as you're going down the scale, just make sure each box looks different from the next. So do your best to kind of make it one step different. And then that last box should be almost pure gray. All right, so to make the shades, again, kind of like with the gray, when you add black to yellow, it almost makes it like a green, kind of unusual color, so you're not doing anything wrong. Just make sure you're adding a little bit of black at a time, and then your last square should be almost black. All right, looks pretty good. All right, so no matter which color you do, I know you're going to do great. Just let me check it off for you when you're done, and good job.